Wish you all a very good morning. A wonderful day to start our conference. తెలుగులో చెప్పాలంటే కృష్ణాష్టమి మరుసటి రోజు ఈరోజు నందోత్సవం. ఇట్స్ a perfect day to begin this kind of an endeavor that we are making. Nirvighna is a two-day conference on the texts and traditions of India. When I say texts and traditions, we are primarily dealing with the seminal texts as of now, but yes, I do have an intention to go into regional texts and several other material that I think it's very essential that we all discuss and contemplate upon. We have 8 absolutely brilliant presenters with us, 4 whom we will listen to today and 4 tomorrow. This conference and the performances that will take place in the evening on Saturday and Sunday, nothing of this would be possible without the support and patronage of Saptaparni and Anuradha Prasad. I think as an artist myself, I know that it is easy to create art, but it's not easy to promote art. We need people to promote such events, ideas, and somebody who believes in the genuine nature of what we have undertaken. And I think Anuradha has always been a massive pillar of support to any kind of event of quality in the Twin Cities. So I am not generally a chief guest person. I think the people who are presenting today are the most important guests that we can have. So I would invite Anuradha Prasad Garu and all the 7 speakers here to light the lamp. We have exactly 8 Ottulu there. So please come and light the lamp and let's begin Nirvighna with that. To Vighna Raja by Ajish Mani.
गणराजेन रक्षितोऽहं गणराजेन रक्षितोऽहं गणराजेन रक्षितोऽहं गुणिजननुतपल्लवपदेन गणराजेन रक्षितोऽहं गुणिजननुतपल्लवपदेन गणराजेन रक्षितोऽहम् अणिमाद्यष्ट सिद्धिप्रदेन माणिक्य मकुटादि धरेण अणिमाद्यष्ट सिद्धिप्रदेन माणिक्य मकुटादि धरेण मन्त्रिणी पूजित सुमुखिन्दितेन दिनकरकोटि प्रकाशेन विनताश्रितमन्दारेण अहम्.
Before I call Pankajji, let me introduce to you the compere who will be reading the profiles of all our eminent speakers. Rohini Kandala. She's a master's in dance in Kuchipudi and she's currently working on her doctoral thesis on Hastabhinaya in Telugu University. But beyond that, she's a very, very old friend. We have trained together under Sri Bhagavatula Sethuram sir of Kuchipudi village. A wonderful person and a great admirer of all our speakers. She follows all of you very diligently. So Rohini, please welcome.
A warm welcome to one and all, to the distinguished speakers, scholars and friends. Thank you Dr. Anupama Kailash for allowing me to introduce each speaker today. We have 4 speakers. Let me introduce the first speaker of today's conference, Shri Pankaj Saxena. Shri Pankaj Saxena is the co-founder of Bruhat Cultural Creative LLP. Pankaj is an author on Hindu temples, art, literature, history and culture. His writings explain the beauty of Sanatana Dharma and Bharatavarsha through stories about traditions, communities and culture. He has a deep interest in cultural anthropology, evolutionary biology and ecology, and he has visited more than 1200 Hindu temples. Pankaj, I invite you on stage.
Thank you, Anupama ji. Thank you, every one of you here who, in advance, have the patience to listen to me. Let me begin by saying, because when Anupama ji invited me, I asked her in DM, why me? This is a real event. I mean, it's okay if it's Facebook or Twitter, but it involves some real expenses, so why me? And then she said, you don't worry, you come. So, trusting her, I have come here. And in a way, my talk today is about that. Sanatana Dharma, it exhorts you very well, first of all, to know your limits and to know exactly where you are. And from there, it exhorts you always to ascend. There is a line, a rope, a gradient of divinity, which you are, first of all, made aware of and then encouraged to. And then it exhorts you to rise to that. And your rise is not unattended. You are not left alone. The Shakti that is there, it also descends. So there is a helping hand. The gods also come your way as you go their way. Great scholars have said this, but as you see, as you start looking at your own tradition, you start seeing it everywhere. As the topic today is Kshetra, Shastra and Utsav. Kshetra is all about gradient of divinity. A temple is to place what a festival is to time. They are about some special time and a special place. Though it is said that every place is in a way divine, every time is in a way appropriate, but there are some times more appropriate than others. There are some places more divine than others. It is to create that gradient of divinity, to show you that there is some difference in the energy, in the divinity of a place and a time. And there is a path to traverse. So, what does gradient mean? Gradient means that there is a ropeway, there is a continuity. You cannot climb if there is no path. In the Abrahamic monotheistic traditions, you are affixed into, you are labeled into some identities. And you cannot change that. There is no communication between one identity and the other. But Sanatana Dharma, of course, is not about that. It is about continuity. It is about the ability of the divine, the willingness of the divine to come down, and the ability of all of us to ascend. As I come from a tradition, my guru comes from a tradition of Kashmir Shaivism, and he would explain this to me so many times. The way Kashmir Shaivism explains the universe, the world, in its 36 points, elements. So it starts from Shiva, Param Shiva, who has at that time, when there is undifferentiated unity, not even the desire to create. Then the first differentiation occurs, and Shakti, the creative power of Shiva, comes and differentiates herself from Shiva. And then the desire to create the universe appears. It is called for, in a certain way, Chitta Shakti Vilas, the play of consciousness. Because Shakti wants to play, it wants to create the universe. In a way, if you are fond of that language, she's bored of herself. She wants to create a universe. She wants to play with it. And that is the reason that the entire universe, entire existence, entire sansar is there. When she creates this undifferentiated unity from Shiv, it becomes Shiv and Shakti, and then the elements increase. One becomes many. And this process in Kashmir Shaivism is known as Sankoch. So at first when I read about it, I was very surprised. Even while by that time I was in touch with my guru for some time, but even then I was very surprised. Why is it called Sankoch? Sankoch means something which is contracting. But here one is becoming many. So how is it Sankoch? How is it coming down? But here is where Sanatana Dharma is different from any other tradition. Sankoch is limiting in the sense that Param Shiv is unlimited in every sense of the word. But at that stage, you cannot, there is no way to express it, there is no way to explain it in human terms, in our terms, in samsaric, in this worldly terms. So when it comes down, only then it is possible to describe him or his glory. But that is limitation. Shiv, Shakti and the ultimate principle, it limits themselves into some other principles. Then the limitation continues, and I am not worthy of explaining all of that. There are other speakers here who will do it far, far better. But in a way, every single individual and even inanimate object is part of that same process. The way Shakti descends and the way it creates the universe, it comes down to the minutest of level. Even this inanimate object is part of that same Shakti. So, why am I telling this is that this process of Sankoch, it creates a continuity. Why the worldview of Kashmir Shaivism, I find it more beautiful, is that it is a view of immanence. It tells you what is there, what is the ultimate, but at the same time, it also tells you that it is possible, every one of us, none of us, of course, or as I am not, of course, there, and most of us are not there, but every one of us is the representation of the same divine. And in a way, and that is why it is possible, because Shakti has descended and has become many, even animate and inanimate object. So by the same agency, even the objects and all of us individuals can ascend towards the highest pedestal, the highest knowledge, which is called as self-knowledge in different traditions. This process, Sankoch and ascent and descent of consciousness, is in a way iterated in Sanatana Dharma in every cultural form. This is also another feature of Sanatana Dharma, that something which is divine, the same principle, the same vocabulary will keep playing at every level. You will see the representation of the same game everywhere. So just like in the worldview of Kashmir Shaivism and also Sankhya, the Shakti descends and becomes many. So there is a gradient, you can see the gradient, it expanding. Same way, you can see these gradients in the three agencies that we are discussing today, Kshetra, Shastra and Utsav. So when you approach a Kshetra, what happens? When you approach a temple, when you enter a temple, the very vocabulary, the very architecture of the temple is such that you are made to ascend. If you go to in south, there are lots of temples in which you can still see that gradient very clearly. In north, it has mostly disappeared in most parts, but in the new temples that they are building, you can still see them. If you go to Khajuraho, for example, one of the few places in the north left almost intact. So if you enter, the outermost ramparts are where all the scenes of samsara, all the scenes of the universe are quite clearly displayed. So, for example, there will be scenes of war, of love-making, of fight, the mundane and banal things, everything is displayed on the outermost side of the temple. As you ascend, as you go inside the temple, these scenes will lessen in number. At first, there is the entire samsara. As you go inside, there will be Adi Devtas, along with other Devtas. As you go inside, even more, in Mandapam, there will be the representation of the deity in the Garbhagriha. And as you go, as you approach the Garbhagriha, there will be nothing but the deity and nothing else. In the Garbhagriha, the deity is alone, because that only is. It's not about Sanatana Dharma, doesn't talk in numbers. That alone is, and that representation is very, very palpable. This symbolism is repeated at many places in a temple. If you see, there is Mukh Mandap, then there is Mandap, Ardh Mandap, then Mandap, then Mahamandap, and then the spire of the Garbhagriha Viman is the highest. So in a way, you are climbing Mount Meru. you're climbing the sacred mountain. And that is literally, very literally a gradient that you can see if you see the architecture of the temple. From Mukh Mandap to the Viman of the main Garbhagriha, there is literally a gradient. From outside to inside, from front when you enter the gate to until the Garbhagriha, you do not enter the Garbhagriha, but you stand in front of the Garbhagriha. So there is that gradient. The presence of divinity becomes more powerful as you go inside the temple gradually. This feature is also replicated if you see the vertical profile of the temple. The same ascent is there. When you have darshan, and why is it so? Because when you have darshan, every time literally, when you have darshan of any deity, it doesn't matter whether it's a tantric temple or whether it's a non-tantric temple. In a way, it is true. Stella Cramrish once made a statement, which is also true. It doesn't matter whether a temple is tantric or not, because the very agency of a temple is tantric. So it cannot function without that. When darshan happens, what actually takes place is when you are standing in front of the Garbhagriha, in front of the deity, and the Pradhan Archak, when he invokes the deity. Underground, beneath the deity, there is a kalash. In that kalash, there are 9 elements, and that same kalash is replicated on the top of the temple at the spire. When darshan happens, when the deity is invoked, Shakti descends from above through the agency of that kalash. And then there is another seed, beach, beneath the Vigraha, which becomes the agency of the ascent of consciousness. So what you are seeing, every time there is darshan, this is the darshan, this is the philosophy. And the more eager a devotee is, the deity is always there, the more eager a devotee is, the more authentic the process becomes. So every time darshan takes place, it is the ascent and descent of consciousness which is taking place literally every time. So that sankoch, that process of coming down is always there. And as you see it, the divine in Hindu Dharma, the divine in Sanatana Dharma is very compassionate in that way. They are always eager, the deities are always eager. If you just proceed towards them with absolute Shraddha, they are always eager to help you. Because Shakti has no business to descend, still it does. So there is that grace, that anugrah, that immense anugrah which is always there, without which none of this happens. This is replicated everywhere, as I said, in kshetra, in temples. It is also replicated not just within the temple, but if you see in larger regions, in districts and states, and even the entire Bharatvarsh. For example, there is a temple, then there are circuits of temples. For example, there are Char Dhams in 4 corners of India. So entire Bharatvarsh becomes a sacred land by encompassing it in 4 dhams. But not everyone is capable of going there. And not just because of that. There are Char Dhams within Uttarakhand. For example, if you go to Uttarakhand, there are Gangotri, Yamunotri, Kedarnath and Badrinath. And it doesn't stop there. Where I come from, Gwalior, the next door district is Morena. It's a very small district. Within Morena, there are Char Dhams. So 4 places, very ancient places, and very interesting because one of them is literally called Devvan. There is no physical temple there. There is a sacred grove, a clearing in the sacred grove, which used to be, somebody counted, there are around 1200 sacred groves still left in India. They used to be everywhere in India. And it's an open grove. But the point is that there are 4 dhams inside Morena. So this concept, it iterates at many levels. There is, within the temple, you can see the gradient. Within the district, you can see the gradient. Within the country, state, you can see the gradient. Within the country, you can see the gradient. No matter wherever you are, whatever your capacity is, whatever level you are exhorted to go upwards. The same is true when you go to temple, when you have darshan of Pradhan Vigraha inside the temple. Now, every temple prohibits individuals who do not follow the charya, or there are some strict rules that they do, so they are prohibited from entering the temple. But at the same time, and there is no other tradition as beautiful as this, on festivals, on certain days, all the year, every year, the deity comes outside to meet the devotees. So whole year you have to go inside the temple to have darshan of the deity, but in Utsav, the Utsav Murti of the same deity, it goes outside, it does rounds of the city. It actually travels everywhere to meet the devotee. So even those who are excluded, they are exhorted. At the same time, why is this important? If you don't exclude, nowadays certain words have become fashionable, equality and discrimination. If you don't discriminate, there is no exhortation to better yourself. But if at the same time you permanently exclude, that is also a way of cutting some individuals off. Sanatana Dharma is a tradition which shows that it will show you where you are. And even if you do not follow its strictest don'ts, there is a possibility of coming back. Because in an Utsav, even standing on a balcony, you can have darshan of the deity. So this divinity, this gradient is everywhere. Gradient is to exhort you to better yourself, to become a better version of yourself, to elevate yourself to a better plane of consciousness, to go near the divine. And that this agency, this willingness of the Shakti to come down and help you, it is also there. Similarly with Utsav. Utsav, when I was a child, I was very, very excited about Diwali. Of course, for very, very mundane, banal, and worldly reasons. Every kid likes to light firecrackers. I was very, very excited about it. And it was a world where we used to wait for our pleasures. We used to prepare for it. We used to stack all the firecrackers because it was not possible for 99% of the families to just go on the day of Diwali and buy thousands of worth of firecrackers. So from 2 months we would start stacking the firecrackers. Similarly, the families, the mother and father, they would start stacking all the supplies that would be needed in Diwali. So there was a build-up. You could feel the tension starting from the festive season, starting from Raksha Bandhan and Janmashtami. After Raksha Bandhan there is Janmashtami, then there is Ganesh Chaturthi, then Navdurga, then Dashera, and after that Diwali. So there is this crescendo, there is this gradient that you can feel, that building tension, which in which socially also, right now I'm just talking about the social element of it, that there was a gradient. The city, the place used to breathe in those times. It used to go up and down in gradients. If you started the year, of course this English calendar, but even then there were seasons that you would start it with Makar Sankranti, then Shivratri would come, then the Navratras would come, then Ram Navami would come, and after that the year used to breathe in and out through these festivals. These were the important notes on the gradient of the year that we followed. Now to come to the subtler aspect of a festival, how time is more important. It is all about muhurt at that level. Because festival, everything in Hindu ethos, Hindu cosmos is all about muhurt, auspicious and inauspicious. Because the Hindu universe is the result of a supreme sankalp of Shakti to create. And that sankalp is at the root of everything that a Hindu does. It seems contradictory to someone who does not buy into this tradition. That on one hand we talk about Kundlis, and we talk about how Prarabdha leads us where we are, and on the other hand we talk about sankalp. But to a Hindu, these two things, there is nothing incongruous between the two. So sankalp is taken best in a time which is more appropriate, in a time which is more auspicious. As within the day when a festival is being celebrated, as the muhurt approaches, as the concentration of the divine in that period, that time approaches, you can feel the tension building up. Because within the muhurt, there are various, there is a larger muhurt, then within that there is a muhurt of 15 minutes, then within that there is a muhurt of even smaller than that. And Hindus are exhorted to attune their lives completely according to that muhurt. So then when that time hits, when that gradient, when that node, very high node in the gradient comes, you take sankalp exactly in that time. You meditate, you do puja, you do archana exactly in that time. That is the importance of muhurt. That is why I said that festivals are to time, what temples are to space. This is where you feel the intense concentration of the divinity, which we are exhorted to always. This is also very, very palpable in the third part that we are to discuss today, third agency that we are discussing today, in language. I will start with a colloquial word used in our region, and then I will take you to the verse. Both in a way connect to each other, and it shows a gradient. In our region, there is a word which all you must be familiar with, especially because of Bollywood, bakwas. Now, the meaning of bakwas is very, कुछ भी बोल रहा है, and जब भी आपको कुछ समझ में नहीं आता, when you are not impressed enough with the speaker, you say bakwas कर रहा था. And the general meaning of the word is very mundane, very worldly, and कि कुछ नहीं है इसमें तो, which has no content, which is nothing original. But if you look at the root of that word, bakwas, bak comes from bak. So even a word as mundane as that, it is the form of the same vak, which is everywhere, which is the, as I'll explain in the words of Sri Ram Sarup Ji, which is exactly what in a kshetra or in an utsav is a gradient of divinity. And vas, to live in that divine urging of language is to do bakwas in a way. So even something as mundane, you can see the link to the divine. And this is very, very common with the local dialects. When you see how abhransh happens, how the words are distorted, even in their distortion you can see the link. And getting hold of that link, you can actually reach the root, the very seed, the beach, and the heights of the divine. So a word which is as, you can say mundane or worldly, even that shows it. There is another form of it, that when you speak vakto in Sanskrit, in refined language, it is always there. When you speak pak raha hai, but the feeling is same. The root of the word is same. And you are exhorted by that even while you are doing such mundane talk, even it is language because it ultimately descends from the same Shabda Brahm, from the same sphere, same very, very concentrated divine sphere. So no matter how low you are, it is still possible to climb. No matter whatever you are saying, it is still possible to climb to the highest of levels. Now, I will quote some words of Sri Ram Sarup Ji regarding that, because I certainly cannot better them. He talks about how sound works. So I'll quote him. Where do the sounds reside before they acquire audibility and amplitude through the larynx and articulation through the cavity of the mouth, and become modified into guttural, palatal, cerebral, dental, and labial sounds? The only valid assumption is that they exist as incipient speech, as prefiguration of speech, and not the actual speech as we know it. In this state, speech is probably held in an undifferentiated form, just like Brahm or Shiv. At least it cannot have the kind of differences that we know and infer from ordinary speech sounds. At this stage, speech and words must reside in the mind as inclinations or intentions. And then he talks about the 4 levels of vak. The Indian sages go further and enumerate 4 levels of speech of increasing subtlety: Vaikhari, Madhyama, Pashyanti, and Para. The Vaikhari level is the level that we ordinarily know, where the sound is formed. Shabd Nishpatti happens. Its seat is the throat. Behind it and supporting it is the Madhyama vak, with its seat in the heart region. It cannot be heard by all, but the more attentive can hear it by closing their ears. It can always be heard by the inner ear, Shruti Gochar. Here the sequence and form, Kram Roop, are not the same, as we see them in ordinary speech. Beyond this lie two other levels, Pashyanti and Para, with their seats at the navel, Navi, and the solar plexus, respectively. They are beyond the ken of the ordinary mind, and they can be seen only by yogis in states of deep trance. In Pashyanti, there is no sound, but only meaning, Dhyotitarth. In this state, the speech is indivisible, avibhav, and the forms and sequence are fused or concentrated. Sarvata samhritkram, as in a seed. In Para, the speech is established in its own luminous form, Swarup Jyoti, and in its original primal form, before any modifications start, before the differentiation starts, before one becomes man. At that level, it is the equivalent of Brahm or Shiv. Here sound becomes silence, a shabd, and only a potentiality, avyat. So this is how Hindu Shastras are seen. It is possible to convey words in other manner too, but Shastras are there because there the divinity is more palpable. Because the Gyanis, the Rishis who have written those Shastras, who have seen those words, who have created these Shastras, they come from a position where they have seen. There is a reason Hindu philosophy is not just philosophy, it is called as darshan, where they see the word, where they see this entire word, and then they concentrate in a scripture, a text, which is meant to speak or read or discuss. That's why I do not have much to say about the text, because when I was initiated by my guru, he told me a sequence that how anugrah happens. At first there is Ishwar anugrah. There are signs, E.T. anugrah. There are signs given by the deity, which you may or may not recognize. That there is grace, anugrah coming your way. After that, there is Guru anugrah. When you really meet in physical terms the Guru that you are intended to meet. And at last comes Shastra anugrah. Because he always said that they are the hardest to understand, and without the first two anugrahs, it is virtually almost impossible to understand. Because they are not something to be read, they are something to be experienced. But if you read and do not experience, you will think that you know while you do not know. And you will spread that ignorance in society. So you should not read before that. That's why I was still, so far, prohibited myself from studying most of the scripture. I still remember the day, 16 years ago, when I was in the library after initiation, a few months after that, and I picked up Trikur Rahasya. My guru came and he's very harsh, generally that's his style. He just snatched the book from me and he said, "You are an idiot, you cannot understand." So, but then I was a little taken aback, but I was used to, because that's his general style. But then he said, a time will come, but this is not the time, we should not read it now. So far, I do not consider myself to be adept at reading most of the Shastras. That's why even when I approach them very carefully, because there is a great danger. It is okay to not know, but it is very bad to not know and yet feel that you know. So that mistake my guru never wanted to make with any of his disciples. So I try to follow him as much as possible. So this is all I have to say about the Shastra. I will end by saying one thing, and with that I will end. One translation of Arthashastra that I was reading, it was by a foreign author, but surprisingly he was very, very respectful of the tradition, and he said a very simple thing, which I take as a thumb rule in approaching while you read a text. He said, "I do not intend to learn about the text or the author. I intend to learn from the text." Right now, currently in modern world, there is this tendency to learn about the text and about the author. कौन जाते, किसका शोषण किया था, and so all the message of the text is somewhere completely lost. So the tendency should be, whenever you approach, to learn from the text and not about the text. One way to do it is that you completely skip, if you're reading a translation, completely skip the foreword, the preface, the introduction. Do not judge a great rishi, a great text on the basis of what an Oxford academic has said. Judge that Oxford academic on the basis of what the text says, what the tradition says. So even if you want to read those forewords, those prefaces and introductions, first read the text and then judge how idiotic that sounds, because it always does. So it is wrong to first read that for spoil your taste and mood and then go towards the text. So even if you're reading a translation, read just the text and the meaning, bhavarth of that text. That's more than enough. If you are to understand, you will understand. If you are not to understand, it will still take time. There is still some chitta shuddhi that needs to be done, and you should wait for it. The text will come to you in time if you just do that shuddhi, that chitta shuddhi. With that, I end, because there are certain, even in these three different agencies, there is a gradient. There are certain days. For example, there was Janmashtami yesterday. On Janmashtami, you sing various songs in devotion to Krishna. So it is a festival. If you are inside a temple like the great temple at Mathura or the great temple at Dwarka, you are inside another gradient at the node, at the highest node of another gradient of place in time. And when you recite those songs, it is also the highest node of that gradient of language of Vak. That is why festivals are important. That is why temples, kshetras are important. So we should preserve that, because in a way socially also, festivals are the last stand of Hindus in public. I am talking about here just about society, that it is the last public impression, last public declaration of you being a Hindu. If you leave that, there is nothing that you can transfer to another generation. Intellectuals have a fallacy because they can understand things better, they think that everyone can. Or they can read a text very well, they think that everyone can. But you realize your deficiency and the damage that the intellectual position can do to dharma. When you have a family, and when your child grows up, when he or she becomes 5 years old, and you suddenly realize you do not know any rituals and customs and tradition to pass on, he will not read the text, he is not you. It's very rare that the child of someone who dabbles in all this reading, and dabbling is the right word, and the child will also do that. In fact, by looking at his father, he most probably not. So, what do we transfer? What is the culture that you can transfer to next generation? It is not the philosophy directly, which is after studying in the secular education. So in a lot of homes, there was a very familiar scene enacting, in which the husband would be, or in some cases, but in most cases, the husband would be abusing the wife. Are gawar hai, you still do these things, you still follow all of these stupid superstitions, and why do you keep doing this? Listening to all of that, tolerating all that abuse, they kept it. They kept following it and gave it to us. Our job is to give it to the next generation. Otherwise, here I am. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pankajji, for the beautiful insights about how we can receive Anugraham of Shakti through Kshetra, Shastra and Utsava, gradients of divinity, Chishakti Vilasam and Vistaram of Vak, how to read, how not to read, and how to transfer practices in the family. Thank you so much.